Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to tonight's Virtual Enterprise Ethereum Alliance London meetup. I'm Connor Svensson. I'll be your host during the session here today. Yeah, so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Daniel Norkin, co-founder and CEO of Envision Blockchain Solutions.
Great, thank you so much, Connor. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for Connor for putting this together. A pleasure to meet everyone during the breakout sessions. Just super quickly, let me just introduce Envision Blockchain. My name is Dan Norkin. I'm a co-founder here at Envision Blockchain. And within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, actually another co-founder, Jason Panzis, sits as the co-chair of the supply chain SIG. I'm also part of the Mainnet working group, and within the Ethereum ecosystem, I'm also together with Connor in the baseline protocol community. That's some of the things I'm going to be talking about here today. I see some other members from the community here as well. Good to see you guys. And I also sit on the specification steering committee there, as well as the standards team, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this presentation. I won't talk too much about Envision Blockchain, but just to give some context into what Connor was talking about. So Envision Blockchain is a system integrator in the blockchain space, where before we opened up Envision Blockchain, which is going on now close to 4 years, we were running pretty heavily in the Microsoft ecosystem, doing project management and service delivery. So we were implementing project management tool sets to Fortune 1000 companies and setting them up with the right delivery methodologies and whatnot. Integrating different systems so that the business units could actually do what they needed to do. So that included connections with Microsoft Project Server at the time, with SAP systems, with Workday systems, different agile systems like the Jiras and the pivotal trackers that the PMO was using to track time and whatnot. So when we opened up Envision Blockchain in the early part of 2018, what we noticed is that there was just a lot of protocol development going on, which is really important. But what was missing was the need to actually implement based on enterprise best practices. And that's where Envision Blockchain really shines. So we build either custom applications for our customers, or we implement like ERP systems and add different components of an entire decentralized operations system, if you will, where one of those components will be blockchain, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So the title of this presentation, and I did this a couple times, so if you're on the YouTube world, you probably saw some elements and some parts I added new just for this presentation. But essentially today we'll be talking about Microsoft Dynamics 365, the finance and supply chain management module, and how that meets Ethereum. So just going forward here and just keeping track of time. So I have around 30 or so minutes. I'll try to go through the slides as quickly as possible, and then we'll answer any questions. So when obviously here we're talking about ERP systems, but if we take a higher step up, we were talking about in the breakout session that we were just at, we're talking about business versus IT. And I think that that's a really important conversation to have, because as business grows, there's this need to be able to work with, external companies, right? This is really where blockchain really came into play, because we all know that we have this catchphrase of the minimum viable ecosystem. You need more than one participant, yada, yada, yada. So, decentralized operations is really nothing new. It's like you're one company working with another company, so therefore your operations are decentralized. Or maybe you have multiple hubs and spokes all over the world. So globalization led to some issues, and now there's decentralized operations. So if we take a look at this, right, from a business perspective, we talk about, Michael Porter talked about the analysis between organizations and the value chain. So we have supporting activities, we have primary activities, and really this is where these two companies work together, right? So you can have the firm infrastructure, human resources, technology development, procurement, etc. That's everything that supports what a company mainly does. And a company provides service, they have marketing, they have sales, they have outbound logistics, they have inbound logistics, they have production where they make something. This could be manufacturing, this could be some other horizontal, right? But essentially, when we talk about decentralized operations, we're not even talking about blockchain yet. We're just talking about these are two companies that need to work together. And decentralized, operations between companies, they run into their own issues essentially. But what we do like to say is that at least that there's software out there to help you do what you need to do. So enter Microsoft Dynamics 365. So for those that are not familiar with what D365 is, most people know about D365 from the sales and marketing perspective. It's like a competitor to Salesforce, if you will. However, over the past, I want to say 10 or so years, 10, 12 years, they've been really, really expanding out the way that they are providing business applications. So there's sales, there's marketing, there's customer service, field operations, project operations, finance, supply chain management, human resources, and retail. And you can see what Microsoft was really aiming for is, all of these supporting activities that are part of your business organization. There is something that allows for business productivity to happen. But for this particular presentation, we're going to focus on two modules, which is the finance and supply chain management module. So going a step further, just to kind of see, right, when you purchase the SKU and you don't implement anything else, these are the modules that come out of the box. So from the finance side, you have accounts payable, accounts receivable, budgeting, cash and bank management, cost accounting, so on and so forth, all the way through payroll. We're going to see why this is important in the next couple slides. And from the supply chain management side, you have asset management, inventory management, IoT intelligence, master planning, procurement and sourcing, all the way through warehouse and transportation management. So again, you could see how in a manufacturing, for example, world, as you're dealing with decentralized operations, you can work off of an Excel spreadsheet, right? You can work off of a Google Sheets spreadsheet, or you can have something that's more robust, right? So just no blockchain yet. This is just a normal piece of a day in the life of a business that is leveraging some sort of an ERP solution. So for the developers and maybe those that are in the Microsoft ecosystem, I'm going to call this world existing technology, right? So right here, this is nothing new. But maybe if this is your first time hearing about D365, we're going to get a little bit into the architecture of how you deploy the solution. So if you were to purchase the SKU and now you have to deploy the application, right? It's a little bit more complicated than just buying the SKU, but you have Visual Studio Team Services. You have this other web-based application called Lifecycle Services that allows you to essentially integrate with your Microsoft Azure Active Directory so that you have all of your team members in there. And we'll go through what that could look like soon. And then you have your finance and operations application, right? So for those that are familiar with Dynamics World, there was Dynamics AX, which is the on-prem version, but now there's finance and operations, which is the cloud version. So as far as existing technology is concerned, we have our cloud platforms, we have our databases, we have our containers, we have integration services, we have our line of business applications. These are your web apps and mobile apps, right? So again, from a decentralized operations perspective, we have this already. There's nothing new, nothing changes, but there's been some, let's say that there's been some places where decentralized operations kind of met its issues. So just kind of taking one step deeper from a Microsoft Azure view, for those that are familiar with Microsoft Azure, when you deploy your D365 environment, this is how it looks like, right? So you have your virtual networks, you have your storage accounts, you have your local disks, you have your load balancer, etc. And obviously, the bigger the rollout, the more load balancers, the bigger the disks, et cetera. And then you have your virtual machine, which your D365 environment is sitting on. So again, this is existing technology, nothing new. It's been around for years and years and years, and it's used by the large companies, mid-sized companies, and some small companies, depending if they have budget for it. However, this screenshot, it could be a little bit outdated. I forgot. I just went to Google and just took a screenshot. It might not be the most current version, but let's just say this is new technology. And I realize just today that I'm using the same color coding as the turquoise over here with the application layer and the new technology, not on purpose. It was just coincidence, but let's just say generically speaking, this is new technology. This is your smart contracts. This is your blockchain network. And to get this approved within business organizations is not easy, right? This is some of the things that we're just talking about in the previous organization or in the breakout session. It's just not easy to get this approved. It's easier to get the existing technology approved, like a database, like a web app, like some kind of Microsoft technology or something like that. Business has already cut their teeth on it. But when we're talking about the smart contracts, the blockchain network, NIST compliance, not NIST compliance, the encryption, where's the data sitting, makes everybody go nuts over here. So there's a challenge in that. But we've already proved that potentially there's a benefit to using this sort of architecture within your existing technology, right? Like I'm preaching to the choir over here with everybody sitting from the EEA meetup, right? You're in here because you probably believe in this technology or you're just learning about it. So just to give you an idea of, where you've been able to see this existing technology merge together with this new technology is really in any web app. So within the EEA, this is just an easy one to talk about, is about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, we put together the EEA Trusted Token application together with a whole series of organizations. It was a big collaboration within the EEA space. But just to show you, right, so there was a UI backend, this is just sitting on a normal server. We have a TE. This is nothing blockchain. This is, TEs have been around for a really long time. But then we have this inclusion of the blockchain network. And I think that this is really where we can start to get into some interesting pieces of this conversation, because this is merging the existing with the new so that business organizations can start to adopt this, right? We need to kind of hide the blockchain talk, because when you talk about this to business organizations, at the high level, people get a little bit scared about it. So last month, as I understand, we had John Walpert on the call talking about the baseline protocol. I'm going to further that conversation a little bit and show you what Envision Blockchain did with regard to the reference implementation and a product that we were able to come out with that has really answered that decentralized operations question and the merging of the existing technology and the new. So for those that don't know, there was the baseline protocol that was launched by Microsoft EY consensus. If I look at the date, it was March 4th, 2020. And we like to say this as the catchphrase, that the baseline protocol is not a product, it's not a solution, it's really a B2B transformation pattern. We've actually at Envision have looked at the baseline protocol not from a B2B perspective, but also B2C as well. That can be for another conversation, but it's more of a methodology where you can leverage the Ethereum Mainnet to keep these systems of record in sync with whatever the system record is. In this case, we're talking about D365. However, it could be some other system, some other database. It doesn't matter, right? You're building an application, it's built on a Postgres database, no issues. But essentially, the main point is that you implement the baseline stack that we'll talk about. Let's see if these things are clicking in here. So you have the mainnet, and then you have these other systems of record that are now in sync and they store data, but none of that data actually goes to the mainnet. And that's the most important thing, that we just get the hash, which is sitting in a shield contract. You know, so all that important information that's sitting in your in your ERP, whether it's SAP or it's Salesforce or some other database or in D365. In this case, that the information never leaves your own silo, which is pretty cool. So we often get asked, you know, okay, so how do you implement the baseline protocol? Again, it's a methodology, but that's the question that comes to us. Again, we start with the business use case design in mind, come up with the design, then there needs to be the baseline stack build. Right now, there's the provide services. You probably heard of Shuttle. They offer a baseline as a service offering. If you don't want to use that, you also have the open source baseline repo that allows you to take a look at some of the reference implementation and build a baseline stack of your own. But then after that, you need to connect your system together with the baseline stack and deploy it so that you can do whatever you want the baseline protocol to do for you. So that's where the use case design comes in. So when the project was first launched, there was the Radish 34 use case, which is the use case between buyers and suppliers in a procurement type of use case that followed the RFP, the proposal, all the way through a purchase order. So what we did at Envision to showcase this first implementation was we took the custom web application that was held locally in the baseline repo, and we developed that on top of Microsoft Dynamics 365 so that if you're a buyer, you could use that. If you're a supplier, you can use that. But that was used essentially to be able to showcase the connection between a buyer on, I believe it was on SAP, the supplier was using Dynamics 365, and that was the first reference implementation that we put together, the first demo to be able to showcase how it is you can actually leverage the baseline protocol in a procurement type of demo. So after that, it comes down into, okay, now you have to build the baseline stack. And there's a standards committee that meets, I believe it's every week on Thursdays or every 2 weeks on Thursdays. And what we do is we talk about the different standards with regards to standard 1 and standard 2, where standard 1 talks about developing the baseline APIs. This is how you connect to it. The interface, that's really the standard 2 that we'll talk about. There's the communication, so how can the different libraries communicate with each other? How can the different baseline stacks communicate with each other? How do you preserve privacy and confidentiality? Again, that's the main thing. The main thing is how can we use the baseline protocol to be able to have businesses adopt blockchain technology and keep their systems in sync without actually putting in any sensitive information on chain. The governance, how it is that we establish the desired functionality within the baseline protocol, and the solutions, the security considerations, and as well as the conformance. When we're getting to the standard 2 now, I realize at the time of me putting this presentation together, it's already been revamped. But just to give you an idea, the different interfaces, we have the iBaseline RPC. So this is how you connect the baseline protocol to different blockchain ledgers. You have the iRegistry. This is how you manage the different work groups and organizations and the different users. iVault, managing wallets and keys and so on and so forth. You have the persistence service, which is being able to keep information from changing. For example, this is where the zero knowledge proofs comes in. You have, again, the iBlockchain service, and then of course the data model. The data model is important from an integration perspective, because depending on your use case, for example, in the procurement use case, we had to build the data around this particular process. That's where the use case really comes into very important design considerations, right? So you need to have the data model that's sitting around. What do you need in your RFPs? You need your SKUs, you need your SKUs, your volume tiers, you need your customers' names, the vendors' names, so on and so forth. So these are all important. They're built within the proxy. And we'll talk about that actually within the next couple slides. So again, I'm just following the path of how can you implement the blockchain protocol, right? So you have the use case design that we talked about, building the baseline stack that we just talked about, the different interfaces. Now we have connect and deploy. So here's what we did within the D365 world, right? So if you remember, I showed you some of the out of the box modules that come with D365, the supply chain management and the finance modules. So we have the out of the box, we have the procurement and sourcing module, which has a request for a quotation module, purchase order module, and a vendor module. We also have from the supplier side, the sales and marketing side. Remember, keep in your mind the kind of the Michael Porter and the value chain, right? This is all kind of intermingled here. We have the request for quotation. We have the ability to send out proposals. We have sales orders. We have customers. The customers are the buyers. The vendors are essentially the sales and marketing, the suppliers. And then horizontally, both the buyer and the supplier also have the product information management modules. This is where they input products. This is where the inventory is sitting on. This is where you can configure all that. What we needed to do was we needed to develop our own custom module called the Radish 34 module. In hindsight, we probably should have called this a procurement module. And in fact, there's going to be a little bit of a rebranding effort around that. But in general, what we needed to do, and we'll show you a little bit of the back end of that, was we needed to create a Radish 34 module. Because if there's one company that's a buyer and there's another company that's on supplier, you see they're on two different tenants. It's two different environments altogether. So there needs to be this Radish 34 module, for example, that connects the suppliers and the buyers together. And that's where, if you look under the hood a little bit, you see some of the libraries and some of the of the technologies that goes under the hood within this D365 world, where we'll talk about this in a little bit. Envision Blockchain, we developed a connector to connect ERP systems to a specific baseline stack. Within the baseline stack, from an Ethereum perspective, the Nethermind client was used. And that's pretty much your gateway to the Ethereum Mainnet. And then there's a whole series of other types of technologies. For example, Socrates was being used, Bull.js was being used, Merkle tree, so on and so forth. So this is all part of the baseline stack with regards, except for the Envision blockchain connector that I'll talk about in about 3 slides from now. But again, this is under the hood, and this is what's needed in order to connect the ERP system to a baseline stack, and from the baseline stack over to another baseline stack, but is using the Ethereum mainnet to keep the system of record in check. So if you were to be an admin of a Microsoft 365, of a Microsoft Dynamics 365, and you installed our extension, this is what it would look like. So I showed you all the modules ahead of time. Here would be a new module. So you would be getting a Radish 34 module that is built exactly to that data model, what we talked about. So there was the ability to send out requests for proposals. There's an ability to, we'll show you how we're connecting actually through the APIs, which is actually not APIs. We're using something that's native to the Dynamics 365 world, which is called business events, which is very similar to APIs. It's just built into the D365 engine. And then there's the ability to set up some parameters that we'll show you in a second. So again, if you were an admin, there's a couple steps that need to happen in order to set this up. Obviously, you need to purchase the right SKU. Once you purchase the right SKU, there's some roles that need to be enabled in order for this procurement use case to take into consideration. Again, from a business side, we need to have an accounts payable manager enabled, a purchasing agent, a purchasing manager. You need to have the Radish 34 permissions set up. And then from the supplier side, it's going to be very similar. And when you do that, that's where you get the view of the module. And then here's from the parameter side. So like we showed you that you need to connect to a baseline stack. So Envision Blockchain is not in the business of building a baseline stack, at least not for now. And should you want to use this, and there's other options in the marketplace to be able to connect to a baseline stack, you would have a toggle here to be able to connect to whichever stack that you would want to. Right now, our stack that we're connected to is actually the provide stack, but the connector itself, and I'll get to that in the next couple slides. We have that actually built on the Microsoft Azure Service Bus. So again, in order to connect our D365 environment to a baseline stack, there was a middleware that we needed to develop, and the middleware is built based on the Azure Microsoft Service Bus. So when you connect to a baseline protocol service provider, there's a couple things that need to be configured. For example, some external codes. And then when you do that, I was showing you the service operations. Now the service operations could either be on demand or can actually run in the background, so that as you're sending out RFPs of this procurement use case, or as you're sending proposals, depending on which side of the fence that you're looking at, you're automatically going to be pinging the system. The system, again, is built on Microsoft Azure Service Bus, and that is sending informations to a messaging queue within the baseline stack. And then that baseline stack then does what it needs to do with regard to the Shield contract and so on and so forth, and then sends the necessary information to that other counterparty. So there's some special considerations with regards to decentralized ID. With regards to a global phone book, those that are in the baseline community know exactly what I'm talking about. And within the D365 world, just to give you an idea where some of the where some of that phone book would take place in, this is an epic that's currently live within the baseline community. So this isn't built yet, but when it would be built, imagine onboarding new vendors, new customers without actually doing any data entry at all. You have your DID, you would just see some kind of key search input to search by the DID, and everything that you see here in red, from the name to the group to tax ID or whatever that needs to be filled out, boom, automatically gets filled out. We're talking really quick admin ease. So where does Microsoft Dynamics 365 meet Ethereum? Essentially, this is where we're at. So we have our ERP front and back end, right? This is normal stuff. This is everyday stuff. This is our deployment diagram, what we showed you before, what's sitting in Azure. This is your front end. We have your disks. We have everything we showed you within the resource group. We have this Envision blockchain connector that's connected to the baseline stack. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you would see the exact same thing, but in reverse. So if there was two businesses that are operating on D365, you would just have the arrows going the other way with the connector in the middle, with, again, another deployment diagram on their side, or whether it's SAP or whether it's a homebrew system. It all works basically the same way. Just to show you some more pieces here put together. So again, here's the Radish 34 module for D365. We also have the Microsoft App Source offering. So this is currently live in the Microsoft App Source. So for anyone that's interested, they can go there and check it out. And this Envision blockchain connector, which is kind of the link between the ERP system and the actual baseline stack. You would need to develop some sort of a middleware, or you can use ours, and that's built into this offering. But if there's a need for that to be separated, you just have to send us an email and just let us know. And taking this a step further, so if you remember that we did this decentralized operations meets decentralized applications kind of diagram, where in the orange it was existing technology and in the blue it's new technology. And the existing technology deals with a cloud platform, databases, containers, integration services. Again, it's nothing new. We have our line of business applications. We have our user interfaces, web apps, mobile apps, so on and so forth. And then we have this kind of like new technology where we have blockchain networks, we have smart contracts and those kind of things that makes businesses a little bit weary, but it's like a sandwich where, kind of on the front of it, you have this existing technology. In the back, you have this existing technology, and kind of sandwiched in the middle, or as we like to say, under the hood, so people don't even see it. You abstract that level, and that's all your new technology. And in the confines of what we just talked about, we have this existing technology that's Microsoft Azure, we have MongoDBs, we have zero knowledge proof containers, we have D365, we have our Envision blockchain Radish 34 extension, which again, the technology itself is nothing new. It's just an integration service. So built on Azure Service Bus with some other scripts and codes as like a middleware. But then we have our ERC 1820 smart contracts, org registry contracts, verifier and shield contracts. We have mainnet, et cetera. So you can start to see of how this is all kind of sandwiched together to allow decentralized applications, the ability to meet decentralized operations. And just as some next steps, we do have some workshops that we offer to customers that are interested in learning about what the baseline protocol is all about, or how you can take advantage of this kind of implementation roadmap of what we share. And just some quick notes, just talking pretty briefly in the Microsoft ecosystem. For those that have leveraged the Microsoft technology before, there's a couple deprecated applications that Microsoft first had and now that they don't. And for example, Logic Apps, it was a connector that's not going to be around for Ethereum. Power Automate, that also, and for Power Apps as well. So that's why we thought that it was kind of an interesting opportunity for us to build this middleware as a connector to be able to help integrate systems that need to connect to the Ethereum ecosystem. We're kind of ready with the right middleware in place. And again, just to show you that we do have this D365 procurement extension currently live in the Microsoft App Source. And I'll just flash this here just to let you know a little bit about us as a full service consultancy, helping out from different use case assessments and workshops all the way through the development phases, helping with different proof of concepts and MVP rollouts, as well as supporting live implementations as well. So I'll just leave this up to see if there's any questions here.
Okay, so there's nothing, no one's put anything up just yet, but I think it was a fantastic presentation, just especially as well the fact that you're really tying together how you approach this from an existing business perspective, because I think that's what really stands out here, is that this the blockchain kind of becomes this little kind of piece in the corner there. And that's I think when you can kind of articulate it like this, it makes it a lot more sense to people who would be be thinking it more from their traditional mindset.
Funny that you mentioned that. Like some of our I want to say like in the 2018 timeframe, where blockchain was just kind of infiltrating the enterprise world, we were talking to customers and they would say, okay, well, how do we build a blockchain application, right? It's like they thought that all you needed was just a couple smart contracts and you're good to go. And it was like, no, wait, hold on a second. There's like a lot more that we need to discuss, and why I think that this is a really interesting topic is because when we look at some of the first implementations that we did, from a POC perspective, is like, okay, they wanted us to build small little, simple type of like wireframe proof of concepts on a front end. But when that's approached at the business perspective, the biggest challenge is that they don't want their systems to be ripped out and replaced. So for applications that don't exist, okay, they would need something new. But most of these organizations that are kind of set in their ways, they want it to be integrated with their current systems.
People also talk a lot about the more disruptive potential of blockchain within businesses. Do you feel that there's what's your own opinion in terms of, at one end you've got the kind of, as John Walpott talks about, baseline really kind of normalizing blockchain, which is, I think, a really fantastic way of looking at it. But do you as well think there's kind of at the other extreme much scope for blockchain replacing these kind of embedded ERP systems that really are kind of so critical to these larger organizations, but also cost these organizations so much to maintain, are an incredibly complex, tied to vendor lock-in and all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a awesome question. Kind of just goes hand in hand with what the whole presentation was about, because you know blockchain won't ever be able to do what a SAP does. It just won't be able to do what a D365 does. But what it can do is it can make it extremely more efficient. Just with regards to supply chain, there's a lot of time lost in understanding what's happening up and down the supply chain. And I want to say over the past couple months, we're internally just looking at, it's kind of like the start of 2021, the ending of 2020. Everybody does these best use cases of 2020 and what are the trends of 2021, right? It's like the hot topic right now. And when we're looking at the really popular type of use cases with regards to supply chain, when you add elements of blockchain, what you're doing is you're magnifying things, right? So with finance, you're magnifying when you're adding blockchain components to finance, you're like magnifying the ability to generate revenue. When you're adding blockchain to supply chain, you're like magnifying the ability to make it. We're saying you're magnifying the ability to reduce costs. So it's like a multiplier at that. So I don't think you'd be able to eliminate, your ERP systems. And I think I would upset a lot of people to say that, you would be able to, you'd be able to eliminate that, because essentially you would need to build an entire new solution that's a competitor to the D365s and the SAPs and the Oracles of the world, which it's a really big task to achieve. But rather, if these big companies would adopt blockchain and make it native into their systems, we're going to see a whole ton of efficiencies.
Awesome. All right. If there aren't any more questions from everyone, from anyone, what I'd like to do is just to say thanks again to Daniel for presenting here, and if everyone can also give a virtual round of applause as well. Next month's meetup is happening on March the 31st at 5 p.m. So in terms of next month's meetup, Marley Gray was along with York Rhodes at Microsoft. They were the two people who got Microsoft doing things with blockchain. So it was a good few years back now, but he's been very involved in this space for a long time, driving a lot of the blockchain agenda at Microsoft. And then we also have Carl Thomas as well. So Carl Thomas is the founder and CEO of Provide. Provide actually offer a blockchain as a service platform, but also this native baseline as a platform service too, which Daniel mentioned earlier on today. And they're doing some really interesting stuff. And they're also currently undertaking a project with Coke One North America, which is the largest distributor of Coca-Cola in North America. So it's a really fascinating project. They were using Hyperledger Fabric for their first proof of concept. They're now looking at Baseline for their second. So it's going to be awesome having Carl talk more about this as well, because he's been very close to the ground on it. Also, if you want to have a listen to the new podcast and vlog that recently launched, This Week in Blockchain, you can check that out at weekinblockchain.com. I'm also hosting a Clubhouse session on Mondays at 5 p.m. GMT, 12 p.m. Eastern, to actually discuss what's happening there too. So if you're interested in joining that or need a Clubhouse invite to get involved, please reach out to me via LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever else. Thanks everyone, and we'll catch you again in a month.